Setting up both cameras. Bear with me. All right, got the vertical live going, and then I've got my main studio channel going for this podcast today. Welcome in. Welcome back, everybody. I'm so glad that everybody can make it in who was able to watch this and join me today. I will be discussing what we have here on the Pile Advanced Research channel on Itzhak Bentov's final years. This is everything I've got, doing a super deep dive with all the research that I had. And I just want to let you know, let's talk about how deep did Will dive this time for Itzhak Bentov. Bentov had mentioned a few names in Stalking the Wild Pendulum, people that he had thanked for their research or their work on certain things. And so I decided to go down this rabbit hole of looking up and checking out some of these people that he had thanked. And obviously, if Itzhak Bentov is thanking you on one of his acceptance speeches or about his book or an award that he's receiving, or he's wrote your name in his books, you were somebody of importance. So I'm going to go over some of those names today. That's the rabbit hole that I kind of went down. And in the end, we're going to talk about maybe kind of what he was working on at the time when he passed, what we know for sure, kind of what he was doing. And then we'll speculate a little bit with the most realistic improbability of someone like me, who's a huge fan of his and what I think was going on. So let's go over some of the names who were in Stalking the Wild Pendulum that he had mentioned. Welcome in, everybody. So Dr. C.J. Casaroli from Temple University, he was assisting him with certain aspects of physics. So I know that Cirasoli from Temple University was talking with Itzhak Bentov. So when I tried to go down to see what I could find from C.J. Cirasoli, he had passed as well a long time ago. These are all people that have passed because these are all people that were fairly old back in the 70s, and now it's like 50 years. So most of these people, I was only able to find certain things on. Not a whole lot of mention of Bentov, because a lot of these scientists and people had their own work they were working on, and they simply just lend a little bit of their time, which they did to multiple scientists over time. So C.J. Cirasoli from Temple University worked with Itzhak Bentov. There's a name that you probably didn't know much about. Certain aspects of the physics of some of his books, specifically Stalking the Wild Pendulum. The next one I got is Dr. Albert St. Georgi. He was a Nobel laureate known for his work on vitamin C and biological oxidation. I went down the rabbit hole of checking out Albert and finding out if there was any information that he was working with Bentov, what that was going on. But much like a lot of these scientists on the list, he was working with on their own projects at the time, their own discoveries, which they did. They made huge discoveries, and they are all worth going down that rabbit hole. I will, in the end, put all these names down in the link in the description, so you can take a look if you'd like. There's a couple other names that I'm going to mention where he expressed super gratitude to. Dr. Hans Seily, known for his pioneer work on stress. He appreciated thoughts on inner sights of shaping his explorations in human consciousness, vibration, and interplay between the body and the universe. So these are a couple of the heavy scientists who had that information, were playing around with those ideas, even though they were doing other stuff at the time. There's a couple other that I might go into a little bit later, but these are the ones that really stood out, and these are the ones I took a kind of a deep dive. I was hoping that I would find some information like, yeah, he was working on this third book or this other information at the time. He was putting a meditation book together. That would have blown my mind because that's what I'm working on. But he didn't. All these scientists, all the information that I could find out about them had nothing pertaining to Itzhak Bentov. The only way that we knew of these scientists is that Bentov himself had referenced them in his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, and gave some thanks and appreciation, expressed gratitude towards these scientists. So let's just stop right there and say, listen, at that point, I've just done a lot of research, and I'm going to tell you right here at the end what he was kind of doing, in my opinion. We know that he was continuing his work at the time about how the human body fits in with the cosmos, how the resonance and the micro vibration, the oscillations. He felt that there was something there, using the body as a tuning fork. as an antenna, as a positive beacon, and as an instrument creating your own vibrations in the world. He believed in what we call psypantism, which is a kind of a belief that everything has a consciousness in it, even a rock. Not the type of consciousness that you would like. The rock is not really conscious in that aspect that you and I would understand it. It's the fact that it's built on the same fabric of life and building blocks like atoms and molecules that are particles, but they're also waves. So it's hard to explain from Itzhak's point of view. All of this is connected through a consciousness wave system. Okay. That's why it was really important for him to find those. He was finding a lot of reflection in the human body as well as the universe. That you can look that up in his second book, the Cosmic Book, Mechanics of Creation. That's what I'm going to say. I'm getting my English mixed up because I've been trying to read these in a couple different languages. If you have a great language, put it down below. I'll be glad to try to translate some of this a little bit later. But right at the end, he was working on something what we call the enlightened body. And a lot of people would say on this one, it is a concept that the CIA gateway process was working on, but that's not exactly correct. I'm going to clarify that today, what we know for sure, definitively, and then we'll get into some speculative area. I like to lay groundwork foundation for a lot of people here before we go to speculating, because what happens is that when you speculate and you don't know the groundwork, you can understand why your speculations don't work, they don't play out. But when you know the groundwork, then you can speculate, because it's just, there's an unknown variable with Bentov dying so young. A lot of things weren't recorded like they are today. He passed in 1979. There just wasn't, a lot of information and data that we have. But we continue mining here on Pile Advanced Research for Itzhak Bentov's work, for a few other consciousness researchers. We continue churning the mill. I'm sifting through sand because I do believe that there's a lot of good information sometimes in very small packages. And that's what I feel that we're finding, especially in these later refinement years, is what I call for science and technology. We're refining our ideas. We have great ideas about things but as we learn new things and they shed some light on things, we need to refine our theories on things as well. So right here, we do believe. Like I said, take this with a grain of salt. Everything I've got, Itzhak Bentov was working on his enlightened model. That was a way of really refining the body, how it can connect with the universe and the cosmos. He believed that inherently the human had that ability. He also believed that this world is, like many people believe, a learning lesson. Much like Carl Sagan believed that the universe was learning about itself through us. That was a very common phrase back in the 80s in the cosmos. It was something like that for Bentov, but it was a little bit different. There was micro oscillations and vibrations actually connecting us. He was really hammering out the scientific engineering details. There's a reason that we called him the plumber. There's a reason that he was able to connect to a lot of us too, through a lot of his diagrams. I think that one thing that we would have had more of now is more of his diagrams. For wrong, for right, for everything like that, he was refining that. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. Just like a lot of scientists, engineers at that time, he was testing what was working and what wasn't working. So, yeah. We also have some very loose information about how he was still studying the old Sanskrits from yogis from days back. And the reason for that is we can see that and hear that in some of his talks and some of his later lectures. As an older gentleman a little bit, we can hear where he was reading a little bit about breath work, how that was really important. We hear him mention the Kundalini, so we know that he was doing some research in there, also continuing that. His beliefs were still very solid about that. that's what we've got. I'm continuing diving on this and finding those little bits of information. If a lot of people who don't know, Itzhak Bentov had a single daughter. Her name was Sharona Bentov Muir. She wrote a book called The Book of Telling, and that included her going back to Israel and trying to reconnect with the lost part of Itzhak Bentov and his life and what we didn't know about. That book is almost non-existent anymore. I can only find a couple handfuls. Most libraries don't have them. And we'll talk about that here in a moment, why you cannot hear about Itzhak Bentov, why he's getting slowly erased over time. I had to make a full video and YouTube thing about that. That's going to be tomorrow's episode, how and why he's getting erased. Realistically, scientifically, and one of the reasons is that a lot of his books, and that's how most people know him, when those books get turned into certain places, they destroy those books. Because those books go against religious beliefs that those places have. I'm not going to name any specific organizations, but a lot of times they're trying to get rid of those new age ideas where they feel like that might be demonizing people, and they just got rid of a lot of those books. Like I said, Muir's book is almost impossible to get. In fact, I tried to create kind of a companion guide where I talked about that book and what was in it. It was the first book in 25 books that I've been writing for Amazon Kindle that they rejected. I actually got a personal message from them. They said, listen, love your work. We're not going to release this on Amazon. And I was like, whoa. He said, this is what we call a short guide, and we just don't have that much success with that. We have a lot of people, you have to understand, it's international. We get people confused. And I told him, listen, this book isn't misleading. Everything from the back of the book explains that this isn't the book, to everything in the front of it tells it's not the book either. I basically wanted to try to get a lot of the information that Muir had wrote in there out to the general public. Because once again, as soon as I saw that there was very limited amounts of that book even in existence, it made me just remember all the books that I remember, the book burnings of this type and era that just gets, even today in 2026, I guarantee you will find some places, heavily religious places, that when they receive these books, Tom Campbell's, Bob Monroe's, Carl Jung's, these books get immediately thrown out. They are not respected in my country of the United States and certain states. And I'm sure it's the same way in other countries, heavily religious countries. They have no toleration for it. They believe it's infecting their children, and I totally get it. That's their own world. It's not science, but we'll get back into that. Anyways, I wanted to do this podcast. I'm kind of going off topic, but I want to let everybody know what's going on, and the fact that in his final years, this is what I'm going to say that we have here at Pile Advanced Research. He was working on some heavy stuff. Did that mean that's why he disappeared? No. Everything that I have, as far as everybody wants to say, there is something suspicious about his plane going down. But the reality of it is that plane was in the air making several trips before that engine detached from that plane. You couldn't plan that even if you wanted to plan that. And if they planned that, I don't think they planned that. That's unfortunate. 191 American Airlines was a real tragedy. To this day, it was the single most tragic airline that ever went down. If you were going to change the course of history, or you were scared of somebody creating crazy thoughts and coming up with wild things, Bentov wouldn't have been the first person you brought down in the biggest airplane crash in history. If the government or some Illuminati cult had any power at that, they would have taken down many other people before they wouldn't even have considered Bentov as being a possibility to go against their system and upset their system. Bentovs was on the outlining area of some outlining consciousness thought. Was there possibility in it? Sure. There's always possibility that you could tap into something unknown at any day. And I tell people that right now. I said, you could go and meditate and tap into something nobody's ever seen before, because you have something called the brain, the consciousness, and its unheard power. Nobody's been able to really truly harness it in any way. So the biggest time, and this is what I add to that too, is that the biggest time I've ever seen anybody harness their brain. We think about Einstein, we think about Newton, we think about some of these people that tip the iceberg of people's intelligence that change the world with their ideas. You know what I see there at the top every time? I see sheer determination and love for the game. That's it every time. Well, what about their brain? But weren't they from this country? But didn't they have a computer? A lot of these people didn't. A lot of these people had very little, especially money. These ones that changed the course of history. Some did. But you know what they all had? Sheer determination, love for the game. That's what I try to bring to this channel. I'm happy being here. I'm happy to talk about it on my podcast. I'm hoping that I share some of this energy with all of you today. I thank you. I do appreciate everybody. I can barely see the screen from here. Between the lighting and everything else. I will take a look at the comments later. I do appreciate y'all coming here and adding something to the conversation. Like I said, a lot of people wanted to know about the enlightened model I'd been working on. Still kind of developing what he was working on. As far as I know, we may never know unless I can really discover some more stuff. He does the meditation, trying to harness the power of the consciousness, connecting with the universe. This follows what a lot of other people do. I'm not even going to say religions. There's a lot of people that practice meditations, practice enlightenment, out-of-body experiences. Sometimes has to do with religion, sometimes has nothing to do with religion. But a lot of these people share this thing. They share that escaping this world to another world, sharing that world, sharing the experiences from coming back from that world. So I am going to go into that a little bit more. I wrote a book about out-of-body experiences, everything we had up to this point here at Pile Advanced Research. But just like Bentov, we're just kind of sifting through the ashes, trying to find anything that we can, taking morsels. A lot of people, the reason I started doing this is I found out nobody else was doing this. What do you mean you're not? Well, it was a thought back in the 70s. What do you mean Bentov was a thought back in the 70s? Vibration, oscillation? He invented the first steerable catheter, a medical invention. So I don't know, it blows my mind when we see people who break that threshold of intelligence coming from next to nothing. I'm going to break this down. I'm going to just tell a little bit more about this. I did write about who is Itzhak Bentov and his past, but I'm going to share just a little bit on this channel. Bentov came from a place that didn't even exist anymore. It's now what we consider the Czech kind of republic area of Slovenia. And he went to Israel at a very, very young age because the rest of his family went off to concentration camps. Okay? When he got there, he started his life over. That's really where he took the name Itzhak Bentov. Before that, he was known as Tobias. I talk about that on my other part of my channel. There's a lot of great information when you start doing a deep dive. I am going to come off the Itzhak Bentov bandwagon here a little bit in the fact that I'm a huge historian and buff of his, but a lot of people are asking me to do deep dives on somebody else. Will, I want you to dig on this guy. I like how you dig and getting all of this good information and get it out to the public so they can see it, play with it, do a deep dive on their own. Because like I said, a lot of this is getting buried. A lot of big organizations, companies, secret things, religions don't want to talk about consciousness and a possibility and some new age stuff. We're just talking. That's one thing about the brain, being able to be creative, come up with some ideas. And it's through these ideas that we really get places. I'm going to leave you guys with a great thing today, and then I'm going to go do some more work. I want everybody to realize there was only 66 years between where the Wright brothers flew the first plane and us landing on the moon. Only 66 years. That blew my mind. I just think a lot of people who are giving up on consciousness, not looking into it, not looking into science, neuroscience, looking into some of these other solid science, I would say give it 66 years. I think we might be on our own moon. Anyways, thanks for joining, everybody. I appreciate y'all being here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I'm going to end the channel, put some links down in the description. Go please check out the rest of my videos, and I'd really appreciate it if you just looked at my ebooks. As always, guys, have a beautiful day.